The year is 1994. A 10-year-old me is waiting in the living room, and my father is coming back home with a bunch of VHS tapes that says with a Sharpie, "The Ultimate Fighter, no holds barred." And I was watching the fights and the tournament, and I was thinking to myself, I think the third man in the cage can win the whole tournament. So I'm honored to have the third man in that cage, one of the legends of the sport, one of the greatest referees of all time.
Thank you.
Big John McCarthy. How are you doing, sir?
I'm good, sir. Thank you very much.
So it's, if I'm not mistaken, it's your second time in Israel.
Yes.
How has it been here last time and now? What is different in Israel? What do you like in Israel?
Oh, you know, Israel, as far as the country itself, it's the people. The people make Israel special, and they're so kind, they're open, they're friendly, and then it's also the places. It's like you go to Jerusalem, and you think of the history that's there as you're sitting on the outside, like by the Mount of Olives, and looking at the walls and the city of Jerusalem, and you go, this is what you've been hearing from when you were a little kid. This is the place, and this is where it all started. So there's so much history, and then it's the people. The history of the place and the people make it, it's an incredible, incredible place.
Thank you. You were a referee since the second UFC tournament until 2018, when you became a part of the broadcasting team of Bellatour. When you started, you had an actual job as a police officer in the police department, yeah. And you were refereeing in the cage fighting. Isn't it a bit crazy? Like, isn't it like being a fireman and selling firecrackers?
No, you know, I look at it, I always tell people, well, if it wasn't for violence, I would have been a bum on the street. You know, and the thing about being the police officer that really helped me with being a referee was you learned as a police officer, sometimes you can go and you can be at a location where you know, you believe this side of this over here, but your job is to take care of this side over here, so you do your job. And it taught me to separate myself from, I don't care who I like, I don't care who's the nice guy. I care about doing things by the rules of the sport and by what's fair for both fighters. So the part of being a police officer that actually really helped me in refereeing was that being able to separate and to say, hey, as soon as I step in the cage, this is about doing what's right for both fighters. And it really helped me, I think, throughout my career.
And the fact that you can arrest both of the fighters.
It just cuffs on, done.
Not many people know that you are the first one who wrote on paper the 3 words mixed martial arts. Can you tell that story?
I don't know I'm the first one. There's a lot of things about that. When I was going to be the referee for UFC 2, I worked for LAPD like we were talking about, and you have to have a work permit. The department actually has to allow you to go work another job. So I had to, on the work permit, you know, I wrote, I wrote referee martial arts. And they sent it back to me, and they said, well, you know, what kind of martial arts? And I was like, what do I put? And so I put mixed martial arts is what I put on the form, and they okayed it. And at the time, the sport was actually being looked at as NHB, no holds barred. Yeah. And it became, we were having problems, and that mixed martial arts was what I gravitated to and said, you know, this is what we need to call it. And at the time, you know, back then, everyone was like, that's stupid, it's horrible, you know, we hate it. But Jeff Blatnick was the color commentator for the UFC at the time, and he's the one that grabbed it and started saying it in every show and everything. Every time he would talk, he'd go, this is mixed martial arts. And Jeff Blatnick is the guy that I give credit to for popularizing the MMA that we now know as the sport.
On paper, it's you.
Yeah.
And it's a good thing that didn't have the sharks from the cave.
No sharks or no electrical fences or anything like that, yeah.
As of today, you're running one of the most, let's call it, prestigious courses of refereeing and judging. And yet we still see some judges that have differences between them about scoring the fights, mm-hmm. And you see some maybe not so good judging decisions, and fighters are getting hurt by it because of the winning bonuses and things like that. What do you think we need to improve, and how far are we from perfecting the system?
From perfecting, I don't think there will ever be perfect. And that's because fighting is, just by its nature, it's subjective. We try to objectify what we see, but it's subjective, and when someone hits someone, you're not feeling it. You're not, absorbing that shock and that punch or that kick, or that you're not feeling that submission. And so you have to have a subjectivity to it, in that, well, I know what the hold is. I know how it's applied. I know if it's applied the right way. So the judge has got a lot of things that they're dealing with compared to what the fan is looking at. It's also that, everyone looks at the judge and they see this person sitting right up by the cage, and they think that that's the best seat in the house, when sometimes it is, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's one of the worst, because the fight's all the way across on the other side. The fighter's positions, what's happening, you really can't see. It can be where it's in, you have a circular cage or the octagon. It's in an area that you're trying to see. You just can't see what you want to see. And so sometimes it's not a good seat. And we've given monitors to the judges. But the one thing that we've always need to look at is, how do we improve it? And I honestly think, we got the judging system that we got in putting those judges in those seats. It came from boxing. And boxing, that was the only way back in, the late 1800s and the early 1900s, when boxing was really starting to come about. The best thing is put the guy close so he can see, and they'll come up with who wins and who loses. And we do the same system now, 100 and some years later. We're doing the same system, and maybe it's not quite the best system. It's important to sit there and say that we can take the judges and take them away from the cage, put them in a room so they don't hear the crowd and they don't hear the corners. Your ears tell you things. Okay? There's a reason why God put those on the side of our head, and to hear things gives you information. And we never want to take information away from the judge. But sometimes, I know now through sitting as a color commentator for Bellatour, I watch the monitor. Because the monitor, even though I'm sitting cage side and the fight's right in front of me, the monitor is what the people on TV are seeing. That's the people that I'm talking to. And so I'm watching the monitor, but the one thing the monitor does for me is it gives me different angles. Unlike a judge where I'm seeing one angle, I'm seeing multiple angles because I'm getting a camera shot from this corner or a camera shot from this one. And so I've learned that, that monitor sometimes is the best thing for you to watch. And so we're talking about putting monitors for the judges, but having them still cage side so they're hearing things. They can look up and see something that's right in front of them, but if it's starting to go to the monitor and look at the monitor, it's one way that we're looking at trying to improve it. But there's always going to be the subjectivity of what one person likes compared to what the next person likes, and that's going to be hard to change. As far as the difference of judging. Judging is a lot harder than people realize, and it's a lot harder when you are the one and you're sitting with this card in front of you, that card means something. It's a whole lot different than saying, oh, so-and-so won it, oh, so-and-so won it. That card means a lot. There's a lot of pressure. It's not an easy job, and it's not what people think.
Yeah, it's you can sit in the room with your friends and watching the fights, and everybody has a different opinion.
Exactly, and you can argue back and forth, and you're right. But it doesn't matter, because your opinion doesn't matter, doesn't count. But when you're that guy with that card, it matters.
Yeah. If we're staying on the subject of judging and refereeing, there's a lot of speculation and sometimes anecdotes about the 12 to 6 elbows rule, and that gave Johnny Bones Jones his first loss in MMA.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate a little bit about how the rule was made and come about?
Well, the rule came about, when we did the unified rules back it was April of 2001. And there was a group that was in that room, was mostly promoters. It had a couple of people from different athletic commissions, and especially the New Jersey State Athletic Commission, since they were the one that kind of put it together. And then it had some people that were the experts, I guess, of the field in mixed martial arts. And then it had a ringside physician that was with the New Jersey State Athletic Commission. His name was Dom Coletta. He's a good man. He's a good guy. But at the time, he was not comfortable with mixed martial arts because he hadn't seen a lot of it. He had seen a little bit, and what he had seen was basically out of two shows. The first show that ever happened in New Jersey was the IFC, which was called the International Fighting Championships, and it was owned by a guy named Paul Smith. And there was a fight in that show that had a heavyweight fight. Gan McGee was out of San Luis Obispo, California, the Pit, with Chuck Liddell. Gan McGee is about 6'11". He's about, at the time, about 330 pounds. And he's fighting a guy named Brad Gabriel, who's from the East Coast in New Jersey, and he's about 6'1", and he's about 215 pounds. So there's a huge size disparity. And Brad Gabriel was trying to survive in the fight, and Gan McGee is doing all kinds of stuff, and that's where, you know, no knee strikes to the, you know, to the head of a grounded opponent. That's where it came from, because Brad's on the ground covering up, and Gan's got this 6'11" leg coming out, and it's wham, and it's coming and hitting it. And the doctor was like, we can't have that, you know. And so it was this battle between Dom Coletta, even though, you know, we weren't fighting, and me saying, no, you need to understand this. But there was, when it came to elbows, they were talking about taking elbows completely away from the sport. And I said, look, you need to understand, elbows are a very viable part of the sport. And this is why, and I explained the difference of how it opened up the fighting. If you take them away, things are going to be slower. It's going to be less for the fighter to do. And so the fight's going to be, you know, stalled down more. And I said, and I explained to him, I said, you allow, right now you do Muay Thai here. It's allowed. This is something that, you know, you guys should be used to. And so it really came down to what there was Gan McGee over the top of Brad Gabriel, standing over and bringing these elbows down, and he's saying, I just can't have it. He goes, I have a friend that does martial arts. He says, and I know that they break big blocks of ice and stuff. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. But Lorenzo Fertitta was the new owner of the UFC at the time, and he was sitting right next to me. And he hit me, he says, John, let it go, right? And I looked at him like, this is stupid. And he just looked at me and said, let it go, it's stupid, you're right. And I said, okay. And so that became one of the rules, and now it's become one of those rules that people look at and they go, that's stupid. Well, it was stupid back then, and it's stupid today, because what people don't understand is it's how you generate power. Yeah. And torque, and it comes from the ground. You know, sometimes in the standing or even on the ground when you're in a grounded position. But to say that that elbow strike is going to be more influential, more dangerous than any other elbow strike that we allow is ridiculous. I'm not saying that you can't use it in a certain situation, that it could be effective and could actually hurt or damage somebody. There's always that possibility. There's that possibility with anything. We just saw you know, Yair Rodriguez do an upwards elbow that knocked, you know, the Korean zombie
ask Big
out.
Papa
Yeah.
about the elbows.
Bingo. You know, look at Travis Brown, and you know, look at what he did to Josh Barnett. And so, but all those elbows were legal. But it's the same elbow action as what you say is illegal. And so it's a matter of, to sit there and say that something that can never hurt someone, I can't say that, and I won't say that because it's not true. But to say that that action is more dangerous than what we already allow is not only not true, it's less dangerous overall than what we allow.
Mm. You have one of the most famous catchphrases in MMA. Let's get it on. Like when I'm watching fights, I'm quoting, "Oh, fighter, are you ready? Are you ready? Let's get it on." Everybody's quoting that phrase. Yeah. How it came about?
You know, that came about by accident. It was Art Davie was the guy who really started the UFC. And Art, for the second show, he called me up to his penthouse suite that he had because he was the big guy at the thing. And he wanted to talk to me since I was going to be the referee for the show, and Horian had picked me. And I knew Art, and so I come up to him, and he says, John, he says, you know, how are you going to start the fight? And I said, I don't know. He said, what do you want? He goes, well, I want a hand signal, and I want you to say something. I said, okay, what do you want? And he goes, I don't know. He says, you're supposed to come up with that. And I go, what am I supposed to come up with? I said, I got two guys standing inside a cage that want to beat the piss out of each other. I'm going to ask him if he's ready. If he's ready, I'm going to tell him, let's get it on. And he goes, that's it. That's what I want. And honest to God, strike me down that that's exactly how it happened. And because he said, that's what I want, I said, okay. And so I stuck with it.
Now everybody's got their own, like with the heart.
Oh my God!
With the salute.
Yeah, got the salutes, got the nose touches. We got everything. And I tell guys all the time, if there was one thing that if I could change, I would change that, and I would not do it, because as the referee, you don't want to bring attention onto yourself. If you're bringing attention onto yourself, you're probably doing the wrong thing. And so, hey, fight. That's I actually started doing that for a while, and I had people mad at me. I had promoters mad at me. I want that. That's what I'm paying for. Okay, whatever. But it was just what stuck, and people, they crossed the two together. And if that's what got them to pay attention, then great. Glad they like the sport.
We all quote it, so we need to keep it going. I want to throw some quick questions at you. Sure. Does the referee has the best seat in the house?
No. When you sit there and say, first off, I have never sat down during a fight in my life, okay? Now, do you have the best position in the house? That's dependent upon you. And this is what separates. People look and, people will start to like a referee based upon things that have nothing to do with refereeing. I like the way he looks, I don't like the way he looks. Oh, I like his hair, I don't like it. It's what separates referees is what they do to be successful. And when I say that, there's mechanics. We call it mechanics of refereeing. And it's putting yourself in the right position at the right time. So you see what occurs. You see the shot. You see how the person's falling. All of these things are what you're doing to set yourself up to be successful, to make that right call, because you don't have time on your side. And it's a matter of understanding the submission, understanding what the person should be doing, and then making the right call based upon what information you're given. And at times, I would sit there and tell you that there are fights, and they can be great fights, that anybody in the audience could be the person standing inside that cage, and things would be okay because there's nothing bad going on. There's no decisions to really be made. The fighters are fighting a great fight, but there's nothing for you to make decisions about. But then there comes that point, there's those fights where it does take someone that knows exactly what they're doing to make the fight, although it's really bad and nasty and a lot of bad things are happening, you're able to smooth it out and make the right calls and do the right things so that fight comes to what we call its natural conclusion. So.
Is there a thought in the referee's head that, like, I want to judge that fight, or I wish I judged that fight, or even the thought of, I don't want to judge that fight, I want to be a fan?
Well, when you say judge the fight or ref the fight? Ref the fight? There has been fights, and it's like, there was a fight long ago. Gina Carano was going to fight Chris Cyborg. And the three referees that were there for the show were John McCarthy, Herb Dean, and Josh Rosenthal. But the main event fight, that was in Strikeforce, the main event fight was Gina against Chris. And I can tell you that all three of us did not want that fight. We didn't want to be the guy, and because we kind of look and we'll make determinations of what we think is going to happen and how it's going to happen in the fight. But we all are like, man,
tough to watch.
I don't think Gina has a chance in this fight. Not saying she's not a great fighter. She's just fighting a different level person. And so when we went, we get our assignments, it's on a piece of paper, and it's that night. And so we all walked into the commission room, and we're given our papers, and we look. And Herb Dean and I high-fived each other because Josh Rosenthal got it, right? And it's one of those, you have those fights. And then you have ones that you look and you go, man, I really want to do that fight. And there's been those fights. I had Damian Maia against Gunnar Nelson, and that was a fight I really wanted. I wanted to get that fight because I wanted to be up close because I thought it was going to be this technical ground game where I was going to see all these cool things. I want to do that fight. And then there's ones that I've gotten where I look and I go, I kind of wish that I was sitting on the outside so I could just enjoy it. You know, but every fight that I got, I enjoyed doing. I was glad I was in there, and I wouldn't have changed it.
Is there a funny story that we, the audience at home, or maybe in the arena, didn't have a chance to see or hear while you were refereeing?
Oh my God, there's so many things that occur during fights that...
One that you actually can talk about without getting in trouble?
You know, it's not so much funny. Sometimes they're funny, sometimes it's sad. You know, there's times when, you know, you'll have a fighter that, you know, he knows he can't win. She knows she can't win. And she's in a position where they're taking, you know, punishment, but it's not punishment that the referee's going to stop the fight. And, you know, their opponent will sit there and say, you need to just quit, right? And they'll look up at him and that ain't ever going to happen, right? And they just quit. You're going to have to kill me.
Nick Diaz, DJ Penn.
Yeah, that's the same type of thing, you know. And I've had the guy who's really consistent right now is, you know, Khabib Nurmagomedov. He talks to all of his opponents, and his is so bad that, you know, he'll talk to his opponent. You need to tap, you know, and he's being sincere when he's saying it, you know. And then the guy won't. He says, "Okay, I'll make you tap," and he starts hitting more. And then he'll talk to Dana outside while he's fighting. He's talking to Dana White on the outside, right? Exactly. Yep. Exactly. And so, you know, you have those where you go, oh man, if people could hear what's being said right now. But, you know, there's things that happen inside the cage. You get, you know, loss of, you know, air, you know, a little gas comes out. People go, are you kidding me? You just farted on me. It's like, those kind of things happen all the time.
Your career is 25 years young, and we were talking before the interview that not long ago we saw the Friends episode, and you were such an iconic figure for the sport. Like when people say MMA, they know the third person is Big John McCarthy. Do you have the chance to sit down and digest that you're such an iconic figure for that sport?
I don't think anyone looks at themselves and goes, wow, I'm special. I'm not special. You know, I look at it and I feel blessed that I was able to find something that I believed in and that I was able to help just nurture it along and, you know, kind of fend off the people that were trying to kill it, you know, and make people understand exactly what this sport was, how good of a sport it was, you know, how good the athletes were, that, you know, people are afraid of fighting. It's normal because most people, if they're confronted, you know, it's usually in a street situation, personal situation at school or something like that, and they have the same effects that we all have. You know, the heart rate starts to go, you get a little rush of adrenaline, they get a little shaky, and that's their way of looking at fights, and they go, why would anyone want to do that? You know, and you try to explain to them, look, that's not the way fighters go about fights. You know, this is competition, and it's hard for them to understand that how can just competition be what makes you want to punch another person? And you try to explain to them, look, this is not about, you know, we want to hurt someone. Obviously, during that time that we're in the cage, yes, we want to hurt, you know, damage them enough to where we get our win, but we don't want to permanently hurt anybody. We want to make sure that we don't get hurt and that we get our win and then we're all friends. And it's the one thing I think the sport has showed. Overall, we're always going to have those incidents where someone doesn't like somebody or anything like that, but overall the sport has showed that, you know, these people are great athletes. They're great sportsmen or great sportswomen as far as the way they act, the way they conduct themselves, and they show the respect that is deserved of anybody that steps inside that cage. Because to step inside, you know, people talk about fear, and that, you know, fighters are, you know, they don't have any fear. Fighters have a ton of fear. We all fear. You know, fear is not a bad thing. Fear is a good thing. God puts it as, you know, fear inside of us for reasons. It's what you do when you are afraid that determines who and what you are. And fighters have fear, but it's not the fear of the person across from them. It's usually the fear of not performing the way they know they can perform and not looking good in front of their families and friends and things. That's what they fear. I don't want to be in that situation. But they don't fear the good fighter. They fear the possibilities of what can happen if the fight doesn't go their way.
Yeah, because the sports is safer than football.
You know, it's different. You know, the one thing I look at football, be it soccer, football, baseball, all of those. You play soccer. You play baseball. You play basketball. You don't play fighting. Yeah. It's a serious sport because you are damaging someone. And a fight is something that you have to be prepared for. A lot of people look and they'll say, you know, fighting is violent. No, fighting is not. When it's sport, it's sport. Fighting in the street, that's violent because most times that's one person forcing their will upon another person that doesn't want to fight. That's not what we have when we talk about MMA.
I wanted to thank you for this interview. It was an honor and some sort of a dream come true for me to sit with you. And I want to wish you good luck in your new career for another at least 25 years as a broadcast member. Thank you.
Thank you
and
very
I
much.
hope to see you again in Israel.
Appreciate it.